night. Am I wrong, Shay? No. You can't be the softer team tonight, which is clearly more talented offensively.
Right.
And you got to punk them to some degree. You got to put a hat on them. You got to put some elbows in them. You got to make them work. You got to let them know you better bring your hard hat.
It would seem like a lost season of sorts if you get this far with this roster, overcome what you have done already, and then let it slip away against what is perceived to be an inferior program.
Ohio State versus Notre Dame marked the 11th college football playoff national championship since the system was founded in 2014. However, what was so special about this season is that neither of these teams would be here if it wasn't for the brand new 12-team playoff bracket. Notre Dame's season was written off in September, while Ohio State's was written off in October. How did both of these teams get to this point? How did Ohio State make history? What went wrong for Notre Dame? But more importantly, what did this game mean for Ryan Day and Marcus Freeman's legacy? Before we get to the content, we've been going crazy on this channel, man. The NFL playoffs are here, the coaching carousel's turning, trades are happening, and NFL free agency is right around the corner. You don't want to miss anything, so make sure you're subscribed and have our notifications on so you don't miss a beat. And now that we get all that out of the way, you guys have been blowing up my DMs on Instagram about the success we've been having because we dominated the NFL divisional round and in the NBA on Prize Picks. For the NFL, I was able to turn $45 into $365, and we've been posting picks for the NBA every day and been having crazy success. I promise to God, I just figured out a brand new projection model that gets us hitting more consistently, and we've been making some good money as a result of it. If you haven't signed up for Prize Picks, use my promo code Mikerophone to get a free $50 when you make an entry of $5 or more. Then go to my Instagram page and check my story because I give away my picks over there. And thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? This college football season was historic for several reasons. For a start, this marks the second season in a row that an SEC team hasn't appeared in the championship game. This was the first season in playoff history that an independent has played in the college football playoff championship game, which was established back in 2014. And as we all know, this was the first year in history that used a 12-team playoff bracket, which, by the way, was an objective success. This entire season, a certain Big Ten school was ranked #1 almost the entire season, won their conference, and were the favorites to win the championship. If you can't tell by now, I'm not talking about Ohio State, I'm talking about Oregon. Ohio State wasn't supposed to make it this far. They lost to Oregon back in October and scored just 10 points in a loss to Michigan in November, but luckily they made the playoffs as the 6th seed. On the other side of the ball, Notre Dame's season was written off just 2 games into their season. Back in early September, Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois at home. This is by far one of the worst losses in Notre Dame history, with fans calling for Marcus Freeman to lose his job. Unfortunately for his doubters, Notre Dame went on to dominate the entire season, finishing undefeated and making the college football playoff as the 7th seed. They imposed their will over Indiana and Georgia in the first 2 rounds, but barely beat Penn State by a field goal to advance to the championship. As for Ohio State, it was a completely different story. They beat Tennessee by 25, beat Oregon in a huge upset by 20, and even went on to dominate Texas, winning by 2 possessions. For Ryan Day, winning a national championship would be huge because he would finally get out from underneath Urban Meyer's shadow. Day was handed the job after Urban left for Jacksonville, and ever since then, he's been the target of fans who say he's done nothing but underdeliver for the program. As for Notre Dame's Marcus Freeman, he's in a similar situation. He was handed the job after former Notre Dame head coach Brian Kelly left for greener pastures, taking the head coaching job at LSU. But ever since acquiring the job, he hasn't been able to win a New Year's bowl game. Until now, that is. A championship would be huge for both programs and both head coaches, but going into the game, Ohio State were favorites, and it's easy to see why. They had dominated better opponents in the playoff and had much more talent offensively than Notre Dame. But how would it fare in the actual championship game? On the first drive of the game, Notre Dame made it clear that their intentions were to control the ball and beat Ohio State physically. On the opening drive of the game, Notre Dame had an 18-play, nearly 10-minute drive that concluded with a Riley Leonard unfettered QB draw rushing touchdown. From the beginning, it seemed like Notre Dame was trying to beat down Ohio State physically, and maybe, just maybe, they could complete the upset. But that dream would unfortunately be short-lived. From that touchdown, Ohio State went on to score 31 straight points. First, freshman superstar Jeremiah Smith was wide open on this genius route concept to tie the game. Next, Quinshon Judkins started off the game of his life on this grown man touchdown run, but then Judkins scored another touchdown, this time through the air, as he found himself wide open in the middle of the end zone. After halftime, going into the third quarter, Notre Dame needed a stop to get themselves back into the ball game, which is funny considering on the second play of the second half, Quinshon Judkins took this ball 70 yards just short of the end zone, and just a few plays later, took it in himself for his third touchdown of the game. Notre Dame then proceeded to give the ball right back to Ohio State on one of the funniest fake punts you'll ever see in your life, which then resulted in an Ohio State field goal. Notre Dame would finally score a touchdown and a 2-point conversion to end the 31-point run by Ohio State. Was it too late for the Irish? Notre Dame would go on to recover a rare Emeka Egbuka fumble, but all they could do with it was miss this chip shot field goal. Ohio State's offense would sputter the next drive, which allowed Notre Dame to score this insane touchdown, followed by one of the most absurd 2-point conversion attempts you'll ever see to make the game a one-possession football game. This was it. All Notre Dame had to do was get one more stop to get the ball back and potentially send this game to overtime. But freshman superstar Jeremiah Smith had other plans, as he had this huge 60-yard reception on 3rd and 10 to ice the game. After this, Ohio State would kill the clock and kick the game-icing field goal to win the national championship by 11 points. Ryan Day had done it. He had finally come out under Urban Meyer's shadow. What about Marcus Freeman? I feel like this championship was special. Going into the game, there wasn't a lot of hype, mainly because it was expected that Notre Dame was going to get blown out by Ohio State, and that opinion was certainly justified due to the severe difference in talent on both teams. But the fact that Notre Dame was able to come back and put a potential overtime on the line for one play was absolutely amazing. I know Notre Dame has a lot of defensive starters going into the draft this season, but I really do think that with the right transfer quarterback, we might be able to see Notre Dame right back in this game next season. Marcus Smith really solidified himself as a top head coach in college football. After out-coaching Kirby Smart and James Franklin, I really do think it's fair to say that this was a breakout season for him and his Irish program. As for Ryan Day, I think this championship does so much for him. He is now enshrined as an Ohio State legend with this win, and any talk about replacing him will be shrugged off. It's actually really funny that just a few months ago, Ohio State fans were calling for this man to be fired. Sure, he isn't the best play caller in the world, but he's proven that he's capable of leading a program to a national title. Despite this win though, it doesn't prove absolutely everything for Ryan Day. After all, he is still just 1-4 against Michigan, which is absolutely huge for his legacy. But still, I do believe that this will propel him and the Buckeyes into Big Ten domination. It's clear that Ohio State got hot at the right time, and I think a lot of that has to do with the loss to Michigan right before the college football playoff. I think that loss showed Ohio State they can't just coast and they need to be able to execute on each and every play. Obviously, we don't know for sure, but I do believe that Ohio State wouldn't have been as dominant as they've been this entire playoff without that loss to Michigan. As for the future of Ohio State, I think they probably have an even better future than Notre Dame. If you can count on one program to always have boatloads of 4- and 5-star recruits, it's always Ohio State. Remember Jeremiah Smith, the wideout who caught that touchdown and won the game on that final 60-yard bomb? He's just a true freshman, meaning he'll be a Buckeye for at least 2 more seasons. Ohio State's ability to consistently put together contending teams is genuinely astounding, and I would be more shocked if they had a worse season next year than if Notre Dame had a bad season. All in all, I think this national championship was historic for multiple reasons. First, it showcased why the 12-team playoff is so amazing. Had the NCAA continued using their 4-team format from last season, Ohio State definitely wouldn't have made the playoff, and there's a good chance Notre Dame wouldn't have either. Second, we saw the breakout of Marcus Freeman. The man was on the hot seat in September, but now it seems like he's going to be Notre Dame's head coach for the foreseeable future, and understandably so. Finally, Ryan Day. There really isn't much to say about Ryan Day besides he just earned a lifelong contract at Ohio State. Or has he? I know he just won a national championship. I know the fans are losing their minds celebrating, and don't get me wrong, they should. But if Ryan Day loses to Michigan again, and he continues his winless streak against the program's biggest rival, I think it's safe to say that fans might not be too happy. Despite the historic national championship win, do you think Notre Dame and Ohio State will be back in the playoffs next season? Do you think Marcus Freeman and Ryan Day prove their legacy this season? Or do you think this season was a fluke and both Notre Dame and Ohio State won't be back in the playoffs next year. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I don't know if you guys heard, but the Chicago Bears just hired Ben Johnson as their brand new head coach. Caleb Williams is finally getting his wish. Maybe his head coach will finally be cool with him doing his nails. I have a whole analysis on that in the end screen, and I'll meet you guys over there. And aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.